Property none. As gleaned from the intake cards of incoming prisoners to Eastern State Penitentiary, Philadelphia, 1927 to 1932. Cash, $0, 20 cents. Property, 2 shirt buttons, 1 key, 1 pin. Cash, XX. Property, none. Cash, no dollars, no cents. Property, 1 ring, 4 shirt buttons. Cash, not any. Property, no. Cash, XXX. Property, 2 shirt and 2 sleeve buttons, 1 key tag, 1 canceled railroad ticket. Cash, no dollars, 90 cents. Property, none. Property, 1 key. Property, XXXX. Cash, none dollars, none cents. Property, 2 sleeve buttons. Property, 1 U.S. service button. Cash, 0. Property, vertical scar on corner left eyebrow, large ragged scar on right side of stomach, several blue scars of coal marks on left forearm front. Cash, no. So those are all actually from the intake cards. This is a response piece, property undone. As if against this vertical list, there might come instead resistive sifting, a lively and drifting struggle for vital exchange to sidle aside the vacant enumeration of present charts. Their official brutal arcs and starkly marked tables of sublimated agency. The meticulously purged adjacencies of relation and intimacy stationed so unrecognizably therein. That hurried and violent din which truncates every being to a mere trunk in profile. A pat battery of bodily measurements whose pent-up, restless appendages clatter in vain against the orders that claim to catalog them. A battle over legibility and culpability fought upon the body itself. The commanding state logics shelved and folded in forceful amplification within the very folds of one's skin or trousers, thus arousing the mounting scrutiny of the police apparatus against us, unto the point that any empty pocket becomes locked upon as an indictment, a pathologized lack of purse that curses its owner to verse themselves in every legal cogitation of seizure. From the fevered gavel of the magistrate to the sharp ribs of patrolled gravel and applied shackles. Was it with abandon or abandoned were we? Might we not variously invent or retrieve another form of coexistence unfinanced by our collusion in the labors of censure or gatekeeper? Might we even leap to ask who indeed is sentenced, menaced without witness by the system while holding next to nothing in hand, and who systematically hands out sentences, holding cells like nothing, like water, relegating others to a mere fodder for one's own advancement. A quick glance at the world unfurling around us reveals that we are not only inseparable from others, but consubstantial, co-formed, cross-enduring, and daily recalibrated in our actions' wakes, in each other's. How then to reconstitute that ground, to reawaken it, so as not to merely rest here, so as not to be arrested, so as not to only walk on one another. And this is from the second piece. It's sections of a longer poem that's called "Whereupon the Hench People's Zeal Did Sputter Some." Daughter colony within a daughter colony, pollinating but dry docked by a rock-blasted holdfast, outlasted until even the crass act of shattering exhibits a riveting division of segregated labor power. From the over-bordered channel least expected to chivvy comes a guttering indigence, a Dickens of a disembroilment. The specimen is heard venting. I was in a manner they didn't believe was dignified, but then that was the very manner by which I was. And so an aesthetic homicide seemed every bit upon the table. It was as real as cable cars, or fertilizer, or Kaiser Permanente, or courage. The specimen thought, this is how important it can be to posterity to make an anomaly conform. Vestigial lobe, vestigial lobe, vestigial oviduct, vestigial cudgel. It could be an unduly hard move sometimes to assign which were the zones of inhibition or auto-impingement versus which were those of open growth or co-exfoliation. What was an area insisted in muscle and what was an area insistent upon it. A hard move sometimes to separate that which soothed from the ruthless. Gelatinous sheath, contractile vacuole, oral groove. We had been asked once again and politely to please believe in the benevolent hegemon, only to find rather violently that we could not. We might as well have refused water, the clutter of slaughterhouses, beguiling bile ducts, unctuous rivalries, or our very own trial dates with all their accompanying and premeditated punishments. Sleep deprived, we waggle danced continuously, but often less than accurately. We, the discalced, the bare-tushed, the squishy. We learned that as a public act, the inside of your body often wants to stay inside. By inside, I mean, of course, velvetized. I mean ideological leniency. I mean fruity. I mean longer than was strictly necessary. I mean hairy and emboldened, be you with or without cause. For this audience, it is the stain that most gamefully demonstrates the fundamental features of being. We notice the pattern of greening and of blanks. We notice the soft patter at girdle view wherein the renewed application of resin is a true necessity if we are to make out anything at all. We notice the fall of tissue which gives rise to a new and oozing issuance, which gives rise to prancing followed by flight. Her finances incomplete, arrears she reared up at first but then was flattened. She shoved a quick fatty in her back pocket and ran. Such unplanned desertions do occur. They are the tradition-shattering components to tradition-bound activities. They release their infeasible call for more insubordination of the materials, of our arterials even. And such desertions do occur. They unfurl, hurling themselves forward at mid-vein, mid-tangle, mid-temper, mid-evidence. Per surface area of ocean, per surplus tanker of gas, per pine-edge casket of talismans, per Samsonite duffel, per cufflink, per quagmire, per person cuffed or bound or gagged. Such messy regurgitations were less than completely precedented. What had previously been only a simple hex or a vexation was now a source of crisis. For instance, our unlicensed debut straight into the heart of their urban renewal. If cutlery could be a betting, they were headed there. The torturous perforations of false ledges and unregistered privilege. They spoke incredulously, as if the existence of a single girl tractoress could somehow wholly refactor it. As if one visibly effeminate tyrant could set all the elements cantering. As if the cant and bravado of a formerly dead broke bloke who was now a global CEO was proof of both the bestowal of access and the latter alike. This was the trickery of parataxis, the charade of proximity as pure equivalency. While all the while a more profound disemboweling was uniformly scowled upon by the administrators. While all the while everyone else remained a ringer, remained involuntarily in the ring and subject to fingering, the bother the less. The woman looked aggressively up at the sky and suddenly couldn't configure. Is it a full moon everywhere right now? In her rigor, she couldn't stop repeating. Not in the least, not in the least, not in the least. We fell for what were surely fake documents and human stand-ins who withstood tightly choreographed hoodings and beatings before our eyes. From behind gill bars and slits leaked lipid droplets begetting a pestering tension of the back and shoulders, an adroit overexposure. The stand-ins themselves expressed confusion at their all-too-real hospitalizations, which more than occasionally followed the volatile simulations to which they were subjected. It was an object lesson not in what the prisoner goes through, but in what the soldier understands him or herself to be doing. It was a strange and grueling mix of determinist assumptions and avuncular concessions of equality. The danger doesn't have to be real, she said, to instill discomfort. A fort doesn't have to be drill-worthy to kill those who encroach upon it. Mock ticket, mock cattle prods, mock battlefield, mock talkative, mock lockups, mock balkanization, mock personhood, mock could. From the caribous and the roosters, the child learned. A nose-puckering sniffing of winds. Coded signals via palpitations of the feet and scalp. Great galloping speed. To cluck for luck as well as at muckrakers. Delousing with tree bark. The stark pleasures of slow mastication. From the humans, the child learned cartwheels, excreta containment, standing position, expressive mobility of the eyes and shoulders, old school freebasing, phase 2 finance theory. From indeterminable sources, the child developed a penchant for huckleberries, sleeping in a ball, adoration of taupe, ovular dovetailing in traffic and in lines, a fine high-pitched squeal. Everywhere the child went, the child learned and burned, learned and burned, learned and burned. And then this will be the last, some sections from this other series, which is called Exposures. I'm going to recruit a little help from a couple people out here. So thank you to them, to Brian and Amanda. So again, this is part of a longer piece, and so it'll just be some excerpts from it. And I'm going to read the opening epigraph to it, and it's from Lonnie Ding, who was a filmmaker and mentor, teacher to me. So these are her words. Everyone wants a human life and a connected life, where they struggle not only for themselves, but for others with whom they are kin. And that kinship can cross many lines. It's not always a kinship of blood or village. It's more than that. It can be a kinship of identification with others' struggles. That can always happen, and it has always happened. Exclusion number 9. The
on-site check cashing franchise.
Elks Club.
Offshore military base.
Nuclear family.
Academic community.
Bail bonds market.
Single professionals network.
Sensor-activated motion detector.
Does not have a monopoly on exclusionary logics. Its territory is fogged in the overlap, both mingled in and repartitioned amid the trap housings of others. A new parapet or palisade, a fading rampart, a bulwark, another workplace checkpoint, an impassable berm, a drug-sniffing vermin squad, an emerging prison hulk, the bulky and overarching chambers of angled steel lattice. I was treated very nicely, he said, accepting that I was in a state of perfect terror. What to make of crowd movement pattern recognition? What of a reef of bonds? Its geographic relief, a natural sheathing of ersatz habitat used exclusively by military hacks for waste munitions disposal, for blowing up ordnance in an oval of oceanic proportions. Today, as the Bering Strait is melting, it opens up new areas of the Northwest Passage, allowing for ever greater volumes of long-distance transcontinental shipping. It melts in significant part because of the arc of ever greater volumes of long-distance transcontinental shipping. We grip wildly at this, by destruction securing our mounting permissions. The deluge we wish for is kicked to the fore, tortured into further accommodations. Exclosure number 16. Before the viewer's eyes, a single high-circling and apprehensive gull draws one dull-colored, tightly clamped oyster buoyantly up into the air, dropping it over and over again, straight down onto the rocky shore, hoping to compromise the pure integrity of the mollusk's calcite housing in order to gain gritty access to the soft, viscous flesh inside. A discus hurler is what the gull's beak has become, a curl of motion. Although the sand below is heavily stanchioned with sharp stones and with knife-edged debris, still the gull cannot easily count on impact. Impact is not a contract, it is a wager. By staging the young freshwater snails in carefully tailored segregation chambers and exposing them first to copper and then to platinum, the scientists have come to find that the halexical creatures are thus inclined to form shells on the inside of their bodies rather than the outside. The viability of such caustic heavy metal consumption notwithstanding, it could be uncannily hard for anyone sometimes to know just where to grow one's armor, or more importantly, to what ends. Having been rendered damaged by one's armors before, having been shorn off from what one desired to be by too much mandatory teeth-bearing or survivalist reserve, having been poorly served by the closed curvatures of constant self-defense. From a moment of inexplicable and surprising uncensoredness, he requested, please include a picture of yourself in addition to your name. Please include a list of all your favorite games and all movies. Please include everything. With great hopes, Kobe. Exclosure number 12. Come on, I said. We haven't got all day. There is a
war,
Made-for-TV miniseries.
Internal election.
financial meltdown,
Title ship competition.
Groundbreaking investigation.
After a long and pregnant pause, she replied, but I am not in the
war,
Made-for-TV miniseries.
Internal election.
monetary collapse,
Grasps of title ship fervor.
Breaking and broken ground.
I am already broken, she added. I am already broke. Something else is already on. Something else is stirring. The kind of worrisome therapy to which various simulational psychologists subscribed themselves when they spoke to her was unmistakably narrative in nature. It cited the acquisition of maturity or the sure signs of strong mental health solely within the stealth capacity to get over or beyond the emotionality of one's affairs. They stare at me as I speak, she said. They stare because they are rarefied enough to believe that if one truly perceives that one can tell the story and not bleed, then one is no longer feeble in this region. Then one is cured even. The woman herself found this position profoundly alluring, but she did not find it mooring. Never mind the far more selective designation of restorative. Is recognition of not bleeding enough, she asked. Is that even roughly what I need to know in this scenario? To slowly and orally repeat the traumas until I don't treat them any longer as a wound, but rather only as a dead zone, as a lonely and isolated area of numbness. The woman further confessed, I know that I am not bleeding. Bleeding is the least of my reasons for dismay. Indeed, bleeding may be the easiest malfunction that I could dare to conceive of. The almost lovely straightforwardness with which once unleashed, its redness pours forth in sheaves. Exclosure number 13. In Charles Darwin's day journal, which records his voyages upon the ship the Beagle, including multiple visitations to the Galapagos Islands, he cites the findings of a prior explorer to those very same bioregions, briefly noting to his readers. This is from him. Cowley, in the year 1684, says that the turtle doves were so tame that they would often alight upon our hats and arms, so that we could take them alive, they not fearing man until such time as some of our company did fire at them, whereby they were rendered more shy. Whereby we shy from and are rendered more shy. Our arms alighted, lit upon, lit up, fired up. Everything is illuminated. Everything is eliminated. There is a phosphorescence. There is an essence of phosphor in the air. Oh, how it burns. Oh, how shyly it burns. A retinal detonal, an antiseptic precision, a scientific derision of sanitizing an area, in sanitizing an area. We were killing time until killing time. We smoked, and then we smoked out all the others. The anxiously charged waiting of waiting to charge, of bowling for gels. There's two last ones. Exclusion number 14. In the winter of 2005, the Wall Street Journal ran a mock, panicked, and pedantic front-page article which observed that, quote, many workers are not fully participating in the economy's gains. It was a bestial claim, a toothless and lazy echo chamber languorously posing itself as a sentence. A menacing signpost disingenuously aimed at leading its millions of affluence-craving readers into a game of indignant irritation, into a deliberate posture of shunning or a running misapprehension of voluntary refusals. As if each of these randomly scrutinized citizens were intentionally and belligerently failing to give 110% to the contents of their patiently waiting check and savings accounts. As if there were a touted sports match or marketing class that everyone on this whole big-ass planet had signed up for and was now incorrigibly botching, clocking themselves in as the abysmal and ungracious students that they had been so abusively trained to imagine themselves as resembling. It made an individual confused, unable either to properly fuse or to compute the details. Could I indeed fully participate in these games, one asked? Could I be a main player? Could I stop craving? Could I blame? Would it help at all to name these things, in addition to or in defiance of experiencing their shame? Question: what prefigures the figure of the modern sniper, of the online certified and stockpiling concealed arms bounty hunter, of the count your riches and snitch on others' futures salesman? Answer: your mama. Question: what anticipates the face of the urban ghetto mortgage broker, of the long-distance predator drone crony, of the homegrown carbons emissions bondswoman? Answer: who's your daddy now, huh? Say it, baby. Taste it. Who's your goddamn daddy? Exclusion number 15. Emblems aside, every individual will, at some moment and to some unnamed and unforeseeable degree, discreetly resign or ambiguously redefine themselves in order to decrease or to avoid the risk of
unseemly creasing of the pants,
Exhaustion.
Toxic exposure.
another bus to trolley rollover,
Monetary fines.
Having to apologize.
prolonged underemployment,
The dementia of stigma.
Being on stage.
a fruitless search for free parking,
Profound disillusionment.
Scarification.
total isolation,
Grass stains.
Of course, this capitulative vein of tempered retraining, This at some level auto-gainsaying is not in the least the same as at every level. And never the devil is. The resistance moves elsewhere. It flares, it waves, it brays. Else we go crazy in the face of our own restraints. The mother who says, "Don't take my son," is potentially a friend, a daughter, a sibling, a father, an uncle, a semen donor, a seaman, a stewardess. The father who cries out, "Don't rape my daughter," is potentially a husband, a granddad, a niece, a sister-in-law, a lawbreaker, a cake decorator, a traitor. His daughter, in turn, is a bona fide otter. She's everywhere. A feral, if tottering, potency of terrible agilities. Her cagey lack of fidelity before all the boundaries that she's been given is the best smidgen of radical hope we've got to our lot. She's a polyglot. She knows it's impossible, and so she tries to make do with everything. She tries to make everything do.
First poem is called Saturday Getting Colder. Which dark trophies can we relegate to past? I want feelings that are buildings and not signs. You tell me no one away is coming home, not tonight. So then let's get on our bicycles and ride in the dark, in absence, in educated guess. All my new estimates are proving to be right. A life is as assembled out of thin birch branches. Now you know everything. I was unnaturally lit from within. There, that's my handbag at the scene of the crime. Do not look to me. I will not be prepared. There are a couple of series in the book with the same title that just show up, and so this is one of the titles, and there'll be a few poems with it. It's called The Dream is About Us. Attempted to pilfer the definition of homesickness, grass level, gentle slope. To those plagued by guilt, may there be continuous planning for the unimaginable, greater care in the loading and unloading of hearts. Winter looms. It's our practical range of demands. It is beautiful to imagine inevitability, dropped, meaning planted. Radio silence. What is the position in which we're tumbling from the ship? To make a wake, or what's behind us? I take the words I like. A voice that thrills, a killing. Let's look up the currents where there are people we know. There is much in this system, every other plunge. In another dark scene, the shore's receding. A shape our voices make is aught. There's a couple of poems that I was reading today to think about reading them, and there were a few words when really big things happen, I feel like they sort of cast this uncanny shadow backwards. And I was reading this poem that I was going to read, and I was like, this is about the hurricane, which of course it couldn't be because I wrote it years ago. But it felt very, very much about that. So it's called A Third Party Who Says Me. City is a way of forgetting the darkness that surrounds us. So fly me east toward the gathering of names. It's a dance of mechanics, just a couple of lights. Not only, but it's me and lonely sometimes. In all ugly rooms, all the people are sad. City is undoing the always that performs us. Here I am, in this space between the lights, making the space greater, pushing the lines apart. This is for someone who has forgotten her flight. Silly to think we had to know each other's minds. I mean, how dare you? There isn't meaning in what we say. Improvise a little, just a couple of lines. We move each other around. The pampered actress has witnessed a murder. This is no place for the numinous. Remains a question of access. What is self-consciousness and where does she keep it? Drowned man in a fenced-in pool. She hits a wave of nostalgia. The dream is about us. The sea swallows bodies and spits them out smarter. Sob of your iron on the black linen dress. at crosswalks startled by the proximity of strangers. Faces at windows, the wave of you comes and comes. What a strange thing a house is when it's not lit up. She thinks that is which appears to be. A long time? Hardly. Instinct fails first, and thus cuts the knot. The only cure for madness is forgetfulness, and in these few years she seemed insane all the time. Reading, moved by a fluctuating eye, she'd go back to the place, but it's been changed. The head is just an organ for borrowing. The dream is about us. Purple hearse parked by the boarded-up church. Mornings I watch the street from below, how the world seems backlit when it's raining. I spend the day, spend the radio, walk as if I can fly. Early, busy afternoon, alone, there is a rebuke in the color of the sky. Flat wood slats, planked to stone, what I call by name is crowding, blank begotten plume. Bathing the baby. Inspect her mouth, but do not injure the membranes. This is a new way of seeing. She stalks so quietly. You think I am less decisive than I used to be, but I can't decide if that's true. Like this morning, I insulted all the poems by everybody. Tuck her little face, towel under chin. You may not realize. Station 1. What joins us in our bags is a danger I believed we had surmounted, crying in Vienna over schnitzel after Munich, turning 20 on the top bunk of a Rome-bound train. To do dim homage to the rain-speckled window, I condemn them like a criminal on her way to exaltation, the divinely ordinary, the particular shoe. I carried a head for Halloween, bearded, belated, more husband than Holofernes, blood, painstaking paint, sorry fantasy, my abulia. Just two more from the book. It's fine. There are the obvious things, and we want them. Regarding the dime novel, see Penny Dreadful. In one thought experiment, all our hopes are made of words. Sometimes it's sadder to say it's not sad. Affections of the thinking organs suffer less when named. We're sleeping when they come to get us. Serial cost is serial risk. I'm thinking every single day what we might or might have missed. And a table that goes on for miles. The women's legs look better every year. His basement still strung with noosed ham thighs. There's a cemetery of stacked boxes, and he has loved it for its photograph. Above his arched valley, there's the stench of burning fields. Who built these kennels? And who is this lovely one insisting, water runs now, we have husbands, we don't need you, as though he could wake and believe that his country was real. So the new project that I'm working on is called Our Book, Our with an H, though I like how there's slippage there orally. And it's inspired by Christian Marclay's The Clock, which I have not actually seen, though read a lot about and thought a lot about too. Which those of you who don't know, it's a 24-hour film that he made, basically taking moments from popular films. So every minute is like referenced in the actual minute in a film, so it's like living time, the time through the movies. And I really just found that to be a really compelling idea of sort of thinking about how we construct our days, and as a sort of obsession that I have, especially when I'm feeling very anxious or very filled with longing or nostalgia, these ways that we are constructed by our days, and we construct our days and try to exert this control. So partially this project comes from exigency, which is just not having time. And so sort of thinking about time in these discrete bits. So there are particular moments which are secretly time-stamped, but they're not titled or time-stamped in person. The first one will have time in it, and time keeps sort of coming back, and they're very much about the moments in our days that these things happen, and how we understand them, and how we construct them, and how we interact with these kinds of structures, and are structured by them. So Our Book. Then they're not titled, so I'll just read through. 1:48 p.m. Music fills up this space of distraction, and I like it when I know the words. The record restarts, but the space is empty. We're the only two who know. Return to the page to sink stomach today. This feeling of afternoon was what I wanted other times. A couple comes in to meet another couple, clearly strangers until now. Everyone tilts her head in empathy. We love to add constraints to our lives. They give permission for errancy. It is 2:06. A whole side of their bodies touches from shoulder to foot. Maybe you will never be so together again. Everything will be pared away. Therapeutic elimination of sinew. Lack of padding makes the joints not ache. I sleep on a hard bed, push elbows against the marble edge, prefer breezes to almost anything. Days are the way we order our lives. When I can't write, I delete pieces of what I wrote before. Desperation, insomnia, whiskey. Mid-morning, the dream gauzes through, obscured in this third act of attempted remembering. Sometimes dreams are diligence. In an old home, a curtain, a new door, and the low, lowing hum of 3 lambs. Wondering about the negative cast of mind, lashing out assumes whip, my fiery tone. Should I note somehow where the day begins? Time significant in relationship to time, structures, 10 a.m. to mean something. And when we are awake in the night, I want to talk of it. Sleepless loss, I am X-2. What do you call stuffing ephemera into unrelated books so as to discover retrospective connection? The slip quiver would have been impossible to pre-discover. As against a stable Husserliana, appendices to the main text. When I release her, she rolls and balls, warm body against bed. When the weight of brain and skull lurches too far to frontal, it is no longer mind. Hallucinating dogs curled at feet, we are viscerally linked, locked in antagonism. Bright walls and hanging plants signify homespun, flashing signals to each other by where we choose to sit. This mug is not so heavy, interloper. Reading is physical, and I am waiting for the shift, settle, drift, 12:16 p.m. Curated accident as governing aesthetic. Silence is perceived differently depending on its author. This is so obvious and embarrassing thought. Object permanence, object to permanence. The ball, the home, the window painted shut from the outside. A large lake changes all of the air, even with your back to it. I believe myself capable of simple pleasures, but question my urge to record them in writing or in speech. Is childhood friendship more gleefully surprising because we don't yet think we are masters of our time? There is a child here who is mine, not sleeping in the time I've allotted for that purpose. She notices things I don't point to first. The exercise of weighing various consoling logics. A woman and child on the subway platform call the police. The man they describe in slow, meticulous detail is the one upstairs yelling. They know each other. A different woman next to me is visibly afraid. Some days catch church bells. Some names don't make the line red. Stuttering revolutionary on the mind stares between backward, so onward. Junk shop car carcasses beside the winding train, weighing the earth or something. How language comes to the child, how gallop, gallop. Wantering, wound, wandering, want, canter, winter, tender. Some storm, soon, day dark house, what the worry is like.